Hi guys, welcome back to another Bourbon Santa video. Today we're trying Florida whiskey. Florida whiskey? Like Florida man whiskey? Crack whiskey? Florida whiskey? Whiskey made in Florida? That seems weird, right? I mean, Texas, it's too damn hot. You know, the whiskeys age super fast. They have a very distinct palate presentation for Texas whiskey. I can almost always pick it out on the taste and nose. So Florida whiskey. How does Florida whiskey work? Let's find out. So I've got 4 Florida whiskeys here. I have Palm Ridge, which is from Umatilla, Florida, or Matilla, I don't know how you say it. Umatilla. Old St. Pete, which is from St. Petersburg, Florida. We have St. Augustine, which is probably the most well-known distillery in Florida. St. Augustine Distillery, it's the largest for sure. It's the only one that you may actually be able to find distribution for outside of the state of Florida. And Wild Buck, which is a rye whiskey. And this one is from Weeki Wachee, Florida. So, let's dive in. We're gonna go Pine Ridge first. We're gonna nose them, we're gonna smell them. We're gonna nose them and smell them. Both. We're gonna nose and smell. I do things different. I'm built different. I nose and smell. Like those are 2 separate things. And then I may taste it and then taste it. I don't know. Whatever. Here we go. Palm Ridge. Let's see if Florida has anything to offer to the whiskey world. It smells young, very corn forward, very young corn. Now this one is a handmade micro batch Florida whiskey. They don't call this a bourbon. They're just calling it a whiskey. It's 90 proof and they really don't tell you much of anything. So it smells very corn forward. It smells quite young. I mean, the color is pretty amazing. So makes me wonder, since they're just calling it whiskey, if they are adding some E85 to get that color like that. I don't know. But this feels pretty young, but it smells damn good. Caramel, like almost popcorn with caramel on top. Like very corn forward. It could be a corn whiskey. I have no idea. I didn't bother to look all these guys up and see what's what. I just wanted to taste them, see what's going on. Very syrupy, very caramel on top of corn. That's what it is. Let's taste it. Oh yeah. Caramel on top of corn. That is very young, very corn forward. But I gotta tell you, the end goes a little, the very end of the palate. After you've swallowed, it goes a little, like the flavors just kind of fizzle. But the nose and the initial half to 2/3 of the palate are actually very nice. Yeah, halfway through the palate, it just kind of goes, eh, and the flavors just kind of like fall apart. It's weird. And you're just left with like a little bit of bitter, a little bit of spice, not much else. I'll rank them after I do them all. St. Pete, old. Ooh, what was that? Old St. Pete. Now this, it's copper pot stilled sunshine whiskey, Sunshine State. It's a beautiful union of corn and rye, with notes of vanilla, smoke, and spice, aged in oak barrels and finished with smoked wood chips, resulting in a perfect, balanced, flavorful whiskey. 25% of this is 4-year-old whiskey finished with wood smoked chips. 75% is 7-year-old barrel-aged whiskey. They do not say where that 7-year-old whiskey was distilled. It just says produced and bottled by St. Pete. Small batch, pot distilled. I'm getting that a little bit of that copper pot, and I'm getting a little bit of those wood chips. There's smoke. There's definitely a smokiness. There's definitely a shit ton of vanilla, a metric shit ton, as they say. The smoke comes through on the palate. The initial wave is sweet vanilla, hint of corn, dusty corn on the finish, but the smoke right in the mid palate, the smoke shows up like, hey, how's it going? And then goes away into that little finishing note. That might actually be pretty good in an old fashioned with that little smoky note. Maybe. Let's move on to St. Augustine. This is 88 proof, straight bourbon whiskey. They are making their own stuff, distilled, aged, and bottled by St. Augustine Distillery in St. Augustine, Florida. Aged 3 years. So, let's see. Still comes across young. Very corn forward again. I have had a few St. Augustine releases before. I haven't had one that wowed me. I've had the port. I've had this one. I had the really high end when I tasted it with the master distiller at the local Total Wine. He was doing a tasting, and they have some releases that I think are good, but none that like, wow, amazing. You know what I'm saying? So this is their 3-year-old bourbon. So let's go for it. I can definitely smell that 3 years. Not bad, but not great. Not great. It's just mediocre. It's just mediocre bourbon. I have a dozen on my daily drinker shelf right there. At least a dozen that outclass this. And price-wise, this isn't cheap enough to reflect its mediocreness. These are very cheap. The Wild Buck, very cheap. So like trying new things, trying weird Florida distilleries. If you're putting out a very young product like this, 3 years, this has to be cheap. You can't put this out for $60+ and it's a 3-year-old bourbon. You know, I mean, is it bad? No. Is it good? No. It's just what it is. Honestly, it's not even very interesting. At least these are a curiosity. Like, okay, what is that? What is this? This is weird. It's so small batch that you can't find this anywhere. St. Augustine, with having some distribution, if you're not putting out at least 4 or 5 year bourbon by now, what are you doing in this price category? I'm sorry. Not a fan of St. Augustine. And their higher end stuff is very pricey. And that always makes me a little, what? Why? Because I haven't had anything from them that wowed me. So it is what it is. So let's move on. Wild Buck, American 100% rye. So this is as rye gets. Proudly handmade in Florida. 100 proof. This is copper pot still in a hand hammered copper pot still, using their own farm grown rye grain. That's a tongue twister. And filtered rainwater. So they're using Florida rainwater. That's cool. So this is from like the cypress swamps of Florida and Wiki Waki. It is very grain. very rye. Obviously, it's 100% rye, but it comes across very dark rye. It's not sweet rye. It's not spicy rye on the nose. We'll see when we get to the palate. It comes across as a very dark rye. A little bit of like a cherry cola note. There's definitely a cola note. It may actually be closer to Pepsi, oddly enough. There's a definite cola note there that runs more Pepsi, like maybe vanilla Pepsi, vanilla and cherry Pepsi. The rye is not super spicy, which is surprising for 100%. The rye is pretty mild, actually. Let's taste it. Wow. I'm actually kind of impressed with that. The flavors never go big. They're just middle of the road. Very nice, mild rye, very mild spice. The cola note comes through on the palate, and it's like cherry, vanilla. I gotta tell you, I think that's my favorite of the four. That's very not bad. It doesn't go anywhere big. It's not gonna wow you. It's not gonna blow you away. It's a very mild, dark rye. Wow, I'm actually impressed with this one. Wild Buck American 100% rye whiskey. How about that? I honestly thought that would be my least favorite. That's the one in my thinking about doing this review. I thought this would be my least favorite. I really did. But it's actually, I think that's my favorite. This one's pretty good. But that nose is kind of going to a funky place. A funky place that's almost a little gaggy. I don't know why. It's super, super sweet and getting sweeter in the glass. Oh, what the youth of this one is just showing through. This could be a corn whiskey, a very young corn whiskey. That would not surprise me at all if this was an extremely young corn whiskey. Interesting. Okay, so Buck Wild first place. I'm gonna give Palm Ridge second place for being super interesting. St. Pete, there's like a sickly sweet, almost gags you. That's really strange. It almost gags you on the nose after smelling the other ones. I have to give St. Augustine third place and St. Pete last place. I probably would not drink that again. The rye I would definitely have. Interesting. Florida whiskey, guys. Who knew? There are a few others that just aren't as readily available that I will track down and maybe do a part 2 of this and see what other Florida whiskeys are out there and how they taste. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, have a great day.